around a transition from May 1st to May 2nd, 2025, in the quiet, rural community of Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia, a series of events began that would haunt Pictou County for months to come. Within the walls of a modest home shared by Malehya Brooks-Murray, her boyfriend Daniel Martell, and her 3 young children, a discovery was allegedly made that contradicts the official timeline of a peaceful night's sleep. According to statements Malehya later shared with her family, she woke up during the late night or early morning hours. Some say midnight, others say closer to 4 a.m., and found Daniel in the bathroom. What she witnessed would eventually become a cornerstone of a major crimes investigation. Daniel was allegedly using methamphetamine. This detail is not just a point of domestic tension. It is a critical piece of the puzzle. The RCMP, having conducted 86 formal interviews, has spoken extensively with the family members to whom Malehya made these claims. Staff Sergeant Rob McCamon, the head of major crimes for the Nova Scotia RCMP, has been transparent about the fact that investigators are forming pictures of what occurred. In the language of law enforcement, they are building a case for long-term justice, a term that signals the intent for criminal prosecution. The core of the mystery lies in those dark hours before the children were reported missing. If Daniel was indeed using methamphetamine during the very window when Lily, age 6, and Jack, age 4, disappeared, it fundamentally changes the narrative of the household. The initial story provided to the police by Daniel and Malehya suggested a routine night. They claimed they went to bed late on May 1st and didn't wake up until 10 a.m. the following morning. It was only then, they said, that they noticed a chilling silence in the house. After a brief search of property, Malehya placed a 911 call at 10:01 a.m. She told the dispatcher a theory that seemed almost too specific for someone who had just woken up, that the children must have put on their boots, opened the sliding glass door, navigated the backyard gate, and wandered into the dense woods nearby. This call triggered one of the largest search operations in the history of the province. Yet it also planted the first seeds of doubt. Those few hours in the bathroom, and the state Daniel was in, may hold the answer to why 2 children vanished without a trace. When the 911 call came in on the morning of May 2nd, the RCMP responded with urgency, arriving at the Lansdowne Station property within 22 minutes. What followed was a massive mobilization of resources. Over the next several days, the search for Lily and Jack Sullivan would involve more than 12,000 hours of labor. Ground teams, specialized cadaver dogs, and helicopters covered 40 kilometers of difficult terrain. The scale was unprecedented for Nova Scotia, reflecting the desperation to find the 6-year-old and 4-year-old before the elements or the wilderness took their toll. However, as the hours turned into days and the days into months, the forest yielded nothing. No clothing, no footprints, and no sign of the children were ever found. This lack of evidence in the woods began to turn the investigation inward. The focus shifted from a missing persons case, where the assumption is that the subjects are lost, to a major crime investigation. Staff Sergeant McCamon has described this transition as a methodical necessity. Investigators began to look less at the trees and more at the occupants of the home. Daniel Martell, Malehya Brooks-Murray, and Daniel's mother, Janie McKenzie, who live in a camper trailer on the same property. The theory that the children simply wandered off became increasingly difficult for investigators to reconcile with the lack of physical evidence. If Lily and Jack had truly opened a heavy sliding door and navigated a gate in their boots, the search team should have found some indication of their passage. As the search efforts wound down, the major crime designation took hold, signifying that the RCMP believed the answer lay not in the woods, but in the events that took place inside the home or involving the adults responsible for children's safety. The investigation moved into a phase of deep scrutiny, focusing on the credibility of the parents' statements and the reality of the environment the children were living in. It was during this phase that the allegations of drug use during the critical hours began to take on a much more sinister weight. Investigators weren't just looking for children anymore. They were looking for a timeline that made sense, a timeline that Daniel and Malehya's initial story failed to provide. Every detail of that night, every movement, and every state of mind was now under the microscope of the Major Crimes Unit. The first cracks in the official story didn't come from police interrogation rooms, but from conversations within the family. Malehya's stepsister, Haley, and a family friend named Belinda have both provided accounts of what Malehya said in the aftermath of the disappearance. According to Haley, Malehya explicitly stated that she found Daniel in the bathroom using methamphetamine in the middle of the night. When Haley pushed for more information, asking the obvious question, "Why didn't you check on the kids?" Malehya's response was reportedly haunting in its simplicity. She said it was dark, and she just went back to bed. This reaction struck family members as fundamentally wrong. For a mother to find her partner using hard drugs in the middle of the night and not immediately check on the safety of her young children defies maternal instinct. It raised the possibility that Malehya was either incapacitated herself, deeply afraid, or potentially concealing a truth she wasn't ready to face. The consistency of these allegations across different family members, including a relative named Lana, gave the RCMP a new lead to follow. If Malehya was awake at midnight or 4 a.m., then the story that both parents slept until 10 a.m. was a lie. The context of the home life prior to May 2nd added more fuel to the fire. Reports began to emerge of a household under extreme duress. The Globe and Mail detailed financial instability and debt. Even more troubling were the reports from the children's school. Teachers had documented instances where both Lily and Jack arrived with black eyes. Just weeks before they vanished, a Child Protective Services social worker had visited the home to investigate claims of abuse or neglect. This was not a stable environment. It was a pressure cooker of financial stress and suspected violence, allegedly fueled by substance abuse. When the RCMP began their 86 formal interviews, they weren't just asking where the children were. They were documenting a pattern of behavior. They were looking at a history of missed opportunities for intervention. Every black eye, every debt, and every alleged hit of methamphetamine in that bathroom was being woven into a picture of a night where the safety of two vulnerable children was likely the last thing on the adults' minds. The investigation was no longer just about a disappearance. It was about the environment that allowed it to happen. Daniel Martell's own account of his drug use has been a moving target throughout the investigation. In his initial interactions with the RCMP and the media, he portrayed himself as a man who had left his demons in the past. He claimed to be a regular attendee of Narcotics Anonymous, going 3 times a week, and insisted that while he had struggled before, he was currently sober and in control. He attempted to frame himself as a responsible caretaker who knew how to put it down when it mattered. However, as the investigation intensified, that mask began to slip. Under the pressure of public scrutiny and investigative findings, Daniel's story evolved. In a notable interview with the Drunk Turkey Show, he was forced to admit to drug use, but he desperately tried to detach it from the timeline of the disappearance, claiming his use occurred before the children went missing. This incremental admission is a classic pattern seen by investigators. A suspect admits only what they believe the evidence can already prove. This was further complicated by reports from the Globe and Mail, which noted that Daniel eventually admitted to drug abuse directly to the RCMP. Old social media photos even surfaced, showing Daniel with associates holding drug paraphernalia, contradicting his clean image. The relevance of methamphetamine to this case cannot be overstated. From a law enforcement perspective, meth is a drug that destroys judgment and annihilates impulse control. It is a powerful stimulant that induces paranoia, aggression, and extreme sleep deprivation. A person under its influence is prone to tweaking, an erratic state where minor provocations can trigger violent overreactions. Furthermore, methamphetamine users often stay awake for days. If Daniel was using that night, he wasn't sleeping. He was awake and active in a home where everyone else was supposed to be asleep. This creates a window of opportunity. It means there were hours where he was alone with the children in an altered, potentially psychotic state. If a child had woken up, or if an accident had occurred, a drug-affected brain might choose to cover up a tragedy rather than seek help. The RCMP is looking at the state of mind as a primary factor in the disappearance. They are considering how financial stress, combined with the paranoia of a meth high, could have led to a catastrophic event that Daniel then spent the early morning hours trying to hide. One of the most disturbing details to emerge from the RCMP's methodical investigation involves the activity around the Lansdowne Station property during those missing hours. Neighbors reported hearing a loud vehicle, consistent with Malehya's Nissan Pathfinder, the vehicle Daniel typically drove, coming and going from the property between 12:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. This directly contradicts the parents' claim that they were in bed. If Daniel was driving in the middle of the night, the question for the RCMP is simple. Where was he going and what was in the car? The investigation into Daniel's associates provided a potential answer. Family sources in court documents identified a man named Chancel as Daniel's alleged drug supplier, in a move that investigators found highly suspicious. Chancel was actually present at the property on the day of the search, supposedly helping Daniel look for the children. The presence of a drug dealer at a potential crime scene is a massive red flag. It suggests a close, immediate connection between Daniel's drug habit and the events of that weekend. It raises the possibility that the vehicle activity heard by neighbors was Daniel either going to obtain drugs or meeting with his dealer during the very hours Lily and Jack disappeared. Staff Sergeant McCamon has noted that the RCMP has deployed 11 different specialized units to this case. They are reviewing thousands of hours of surveillance footage and analyzing financial records for cash withdrawals that might match drug transactions. They are looking for residue, both physical residue of drugs in the home and the residue of a life lived in the shadows of addiction. The term, forming pictures, suggests that they are overlaying the neighbors' reports of the loud vehicle with the cellular data and the statements about the drug dealer. Every piece of evidence points away from the wandering child theory and toward a coordinated effort to manage a crisis. If Daniel was awake, using, and driving throughout the night, the 911 call at 10 a.m. wasn't the start of the tragedy. It was the final act of cover-up. The RCMP's focus on long-term justice indicates they are not looking for a quick confession, but for forensic and circumstantial evidence that will prove exactly what happened during those trips in the Pathfinder. They are looking for the truth that was allegedly hidden by the darkness of the night and the fog of a methamphetamine high. As of January 2026, the disappearance of Lily and Jack Sullivan remains one of the most complex and high-volume cases in Staff Sergeant McCamon's 25-year career. Despite the passage of time, the RCMP has not backed down. Both Daniel Martell and Malehya Brooks-Murray have publicly stated that they passed polygraph tests and maintain their innocence. But in the Canadian legal system, polygraphs are not admissible as evidence because they are not considered reliable. The RCMP clearly places more weight on the 86 formal interviews and the growing pile of inconsistencies in the couple's stories. The behavior of the adults in the months following the disappearance has only added to the public's and the family's frustration. Malehya's stepsister has described a mother who, rather than being consumed by grief, has been seen drinking heavily and going out as if nothing happened. This perceived lack of appropriate mourning, combined with her conflicting statements about finding Daniel in the bathroom, has alienated her from much of her family. Meanwhile, Daniel's mother, Janie, has remained defensive, refusing to address the drug allegations and telling critics to mind their own business. This wall of silence and defensiveness from the people who were on the property that night is a significant hurdle, but it is one the RCMP is systematically dismantling. The goal is long-term justice. This means the investigators are ensuring that every piece of evidence, from the school reports of black eyes to the neighbors' accounts of the midnight vehicle, is bulletproof for a future trial. They are building a narrative of a night where 2 children were left unprotected in a home shadowed by methamphetamine and financial despair. The RCMP's message is clear. They will not stop until they have answers. The tragedy of Lily and Jack Sullivan is a story of a system that failed to intervene despite numerous warning signs. But it is also a story of community and a police force that refused to forget. The investigation continues to focus on the truth of those critical hours between May 1st and May 2nd, whether it was an accident fueled by a drug-induced panic or something more intentional. The truth lies in the contradictions of the people who were supposed to keep them safe. For a community that searched tirelessly and a family that has lost everything, the hope remains that the pictures being formed by the RCMP will finally bring the accountability that Lily and Jack deserve. The truth may be buried deep, but the search for justice is far from over.